There it is. So you can see right now here a little bit of what the AI configs platform looks like. So I'm going to first start with like a little talk about what it means to kind of work iteratively in that way that's endemic to Gen AI. So basically working with variations. You totally need the ability to configure agents dynamically, and you need to be able to do that at some kind of scale with some kind of velocity. So going to the platform here, you can see that I have an agent. I'll pop it up right now. That's doing some resource work behind like a mental health chatbot kind of resource. And I picked this example because it's interesting. Like that's something that people are increasingly kind of turning to Gen AI for, especially ChatGPT, most famously or perhaps infamously, but also because it's like a really risky space to operate in, but also a very productive one. So I have three different variations of the retrieval agent behind this bot here. And in each one, I'm specifying things like what model to use, what model provider to take it from, what metadata or control data to leverage, what tools to use, and what kind of MCP connections to navigate, and then prompts as well, all within the platform. And what's going to happen is the agent structure or the workflow that's living in my application is going to automatically retrieve this information step of the conversation in order to continually update and configure that agent based on decisions that I'm making upstream. And this is useful because I can easily duplicate, make a small tweak, make a change, clone, make a whole bunch of changes, etc., and then test the results at scale, either in pre-production or as a shadow release in production or just to beta users. So I mean, like a very kind of simple and superficial example of this is let's go into the particular prompt for this part of the agent and say, answer all questions in French, for example. Can make this change really quickly. Change is applied. And I'm thinking about what to tell my mental health chatbot. Let's just say, I'm happy today, which is true. And you can see now that the chatbot's going to respond to French, right? And of course, if I eliminate this entry right here, make the change back, ask it the same question, I'm going to get a response back in English now. And that's great. Not a very not a very helpful response, kind of flippant to be totally honest, but at least I do get the ability to make that kind of level of configuration so quickly, and again, constrain it to one or more different variations, right? So I have three different variations that I showed you on that first page. It's really easy for me to set up a split test for my beta users. So you can see that right here. So let's say I want to identify, a beta user and then serve them some kind of split here. Well, let me split out my beta user segment, and then I'll serve them, let's say, a manual percentage of those particular models right next to each other, right? So I can serve, this one, this one, this one, maybe this one has a different prompt. This one maybe has a slightly different recourse to a tool, and I can look at the aggregated results of all of that at scale. Yeah. So going back to the chatbot here, you can see that I'm getting metrics back. I'm getting responses back at scale. Yeah, that's totally true. That wasn't very, very helpful or accurate. I'm getting an accuracy score, I'm getting toxicity scoring, I'm getting relevance, grounding scores. They're live, they're actionable to me when making decisions, and I'm even also getting the reasoning back as well. And I'm using, it's really true, I'm using LaunchDarkly to power this evaluation, but I'm not actually running this evaluation within the LaunchDarkly platform. Instead, I'm using what we call a judge config, which we can customize and iterate upon in the same way that you would any other part of a multi-agent network. So we use a schema called geval here, which is an emerging standard for LLM judges, passing to a specialist node the, let's say, the content of a customer question, the context around who that customer is, the context an agent used to make a decision about an answer, source of truth information, and then a framework with which to evaluate that model's answer. And I can use evaluation metrics to make dynamic decisions around which agent node setting to use. So let's say, like, in this particular case, instead of just rolling out a split to a beta user, let's say I really kind of have started to like this new variation that I constructed. I'm going to create a guarded rollout where I'm moving from the first edition of this agent to this third one that I constructed, this new variation. I'm going to guard this rollout based on my accuracy metric so that if accuracy dips below some metric, I can automatically revert this back and move back to the original version that I had trusted, right? So this, again, gives me the confidence to actually make commitments, actually make changes, and ultimately continue to improve that agent structure that I'm leveraging. So now, like, what happens if something goes wrong, right? Like, I can actually do something about it before it goes to the customer by leveraging what Kirsten was calling a guardrail. And so let me ask a really kind of cheeky question here. Having trouble with my spouse, for example. So let's see what the model says here. Okay. I mean, objectively a true-ish answer, but maybe a little bit toxic, maybe a little bit presumptuous about the status of something. Not necessarily the most useful useful return for like a frontline chatbot like this. But because I have in-step evals running, a guardrail fires if the toxicity scoring ramps up. So you can see here, well, I'm definitely getting a pretty high toxicity rating. This is like not a very nice response, especially for the particular context that it's operating in. And so what is happening under the hood is if the toxicity score leaps or the factual accuracy drops underneath some rating, I can automatically bring in a guardrail. Now, ultimately, what I would do is I wouldn't even show this message to the customer. I'm just displaying this here. But yeah, it gives you the alacrity to, make a change, let's say within the actual interface itself. In this case, I'm citing an alert. But even more interestingly, I'll show you this. I'm going to go to the targeting page again, and you can see it switched itself off. So because the guardrail fired, my automation has worked in such a way that allows me to, constrain or contain any kind of bad behavior. Again, I could definitely make sure to not send this message to the customer, make sure that I get some kind of visual impact here that something is maybe going wrong, or automatically make a routing change behind the surface to bring in another agent, an agent that we know is working, or and maybe altogether power off an agent that we know is not performing well. Lots and lots of opportunities for automation. Final piece for me, Kirsten was talking about metrics, especially business metrics. I can think of like 3 categories of metrics that we think everyone should care about when they're working with agentic AI. The first is like telemetry metrics. So how fast, how efficient, how many tokens are you using, how expensive is the process that you're working with. You can see we're also piping in all of that information as first-party metrics directly back to the platform via the SDK. We also care about evaluative metrics. So accuracy, toxicity, grounding, relevance, all those things coming from an evaluator. That's another type of metric that you can use to inform decisions about the GenAI workflow that you're working on. But then the third is those business metrics, ROI, next step KPIs, customer KPIs, things that like can actually be used to leverage how you grow, adapt, and change your model over time. So like metrics are actually really easy to set up. Metrics are contained here. This is the metrics pane right here. And I'll show you. I'll just create a new metric and call it customer API or anything like that. But at the end of the day, all you really need to do is identify the metric that you care about, type it in some way, and then associate its key with a variable that's within your application. And our SDK will do all the hard work of pulling those metrics and connecting them to their exposures. From there, you have tons and tons of dashboards, trend analyses, analytical tools that you can use within our platform, or even natively within a data warehouse like Snowflake, to understand the patterns behind those metrics. So I'm showing, let's say, an experiment right here. This is within our experimentation engine, lots and lots of super beefy, muscular, statistical stuff going on here. But it's really giving you like a super powerful perspective on how multiple variables performed against each other when, in this case, choosing against different models associated with an agent node. So I can see, these 4 models went with this particular agent node and led to these outcomes. I can see, some kind of play against accuracy, strong differentiation against duration, extremely strong differentiation against cost right here. And like the amount of potential detail here is really extraordinary because like you can get not only a sense of like which agent setting worked best according to the metrics that you care about, be it telemetry, evaluation, or your business KPIs, but also like which conditions, which customers, which exposures, which context led to changes in behavior. And that lets you actually dynamically model out things like cost, for example, which is really, really hard to do if you don't have that kind of level of granularity. So that's enough for me in terms of kind of showing you what this looks like, from a very surface level perspective. Would love to show you more. Would love to talk about this in more detail. I think it's a really, really powerful platform.